and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, the president who, together with a band of explosives, thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy.
Okay, this indictment, I promise, is different than the first one. And this podcast, we're going to go over this recent federal indictment and arrest of Donald Trump. Like I said, this is different than the other one. This is different than all the other cases. And like another thing that I always say, I swear I could teach a full law school just on Donald Trump's cases. And this one in particular, it's going to be something that's going to last for several years, and it's going to be very important to the history of the United States. So, and a couple of things I want to get out of the way. I do not understand why, when he was indicted and when he had to plead not guilty, why did he have to be there in person? It's actually not any sort of requirement that for the not guilty plea that someone has to be there in person. And I think, they stopped all of Miami that day. They spent millions and millions of dollars on police that day just to have a, quick appearance where his lawyer, not even Donald Trump himself, said, "We plead not guilty." All of that could have been done virtually, even way before COVID. In California, there will be a lot of times when there's, that arraignment. They used to call it a fax arraignment because there wasn't any sort of Zoom or virtual anything back in the day. And it was still something we didn't have to haul the defendant in just to say not guilty. So the lawyer would just fax the not guilty plea to the to the criminal court here in California. So I think that a lot of that, in my opinion, was show and tell type of thing. We could have saved millions of dollars and not shut down Miami, just like we didn't have to shut down New York when New York did the same thing. And that was a state government, whereas this one is the federal government. And heck, if they really want the judge to be there with Donald Trump, it would have been cheaper if the judge and the FBI just went to Donald Trump's house and did the arraignment over there. It's not like they were going to arrest him and put him in jail that day, right? So anyway, I wanted to get that out of the way. The other things that I don't like about this is why in the world does the federal court not allow cameras or video recordings? Instead of being able to watch and hear the whole proceeding, we have to look at these artists sketching. So the reason why they do that is because the federal court does not want to be transparent. And that's the only reason. Some of the judges will say, no, we don't want to turn the court into, a circus. That's not the truth. They just don't want to be transparent. And so that's why, and the best we could get is these stupid courtroom sketches when it would be easier just to put a tiny little camera and record everything. In my opinion, everything should be recorded. Everything should be transparent. We should be able to go on the internet and be like, okay, I want to listen to this hearing on this date and blah, 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 blah. And everything should be watched. Maybe with the exception if there's like a child that has to testify in some sort of, like sexual assault or molestation thing, maybe, that would be an exception. Maybe a few others, but otherwise it should all be transparent. Okay, even in the freaking United States Supreme Court, the most important court, you cannot take a camera in there, and there's no recordings of any sort of proceedings in the United States Supreme Court. Now we get to this particular case and why this case is so much different. Now, what happened was this, and a lot of people have been asking me, what's this? It's a grand jury that indicted Donald Trump. So let me explain that procedure first. And this goes back to the 1200s in England, this thing about the grand jury. And the way it works is this. It was the Magna Carta, all right, in the year 1215. All right, that's over 800 years ago. And there was like these revolutions in England and in the Commonwealth. And the king had just too much power, and he could have people arrested and held in prison for years before any sort of charge or trial or anything like that. So in part of that revolution in the kind of settlement agreement was they agreed, all right, from now on, before there's any sort of charge, you have to have a grand jury, which are, the people and a certain amount of people that say, oh yeah, these crimes were committed or possibly was committed, so it's okay to charge them. So that was 800 years ago, right? And to this day, that is the law in the federal government of the United States. Before the federal government can make any sort of charge, like of a felony, anything over a freaking, parking ticket or something, anything over that, it can't just be the federal government charges someone. They have to get the blessing, of the grand jury. Now that threshold is very low. It's not the same threshold as a jury in a criminal case that says this person is guilty beyond reasonable doubt. So what happened was that the federal government gathered all this evidence against Donald Trump over the past few years, and then they presented all of that evidence in such a fashion to the grand jury. The grand jury reviewed everything and then came back and said, there's enough evidence here to charge Donald Trump with these criminal allegations. And so that is what happened. So that is where we then get what's called the indictment. Now, the next step is that after there's an indictment, they, arrest the person, bring them to the court, and then the judge reads the indictment to the defendant, and then defendant has the opportunity to say, I'm guilty or I'm not guilty. Almost always they say, I'm not guilty. And then the prosecutor has to work with the defense team and gather the evidence, exchange evidence, and then if they can't agree on some sort of plea deal, then there'll be a trial. So that's what happened here. Now, instead of arresting Donald Trump just out of the blue, which they could do, they do that to most defendants. In certain white-collar situations, they'll work with the lawyers of the defendant, and the lawyers of the defendant will say something like, look, instead of arresting this guy, just let us know when you want him to appear in court. And we promise, and he promises that he'll just show up voluntarily. And as long as they get that and it's a credible kind of deal that they have, then they don't have to arrest the person at their house. A lot of times their concern will be, obviously, we don't want to tell somebody that we need him in court, or we need to arrest him because maybe he'll flee the country or maybe he'll, evade the police or whatever. So if they're worried about that, then they'll go arrest the person at the house or in the middle of the night or wherever the person is. If they're not worried about that and they have a dialogue going along with the lawyers, then they'll do the indictment the way they did it with Donald Trump in June of 2023. So that's what happened, okay? And what I'm saying is that whole hearing could have been done virtually so that we didn't actually have to have him physically there. But for whatever reason, they wanted to do the show and tell, which is funny because we can't see it because there's no recordings allowed in the federal court, All right. I'm done ranting for now. And I'm going to then get to this case. Oh, by the way, about the grand jury, it's even in, when I said the federal government has to do this, because in the Fifth Amendment, it states in there, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. And so there it is. It's right there in the Fifth Amendment that it says that. So that's why before we charge anyone with the federal court, there has to be this indictment. And it does say in the Constitution, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Now that is, by the way, those the inmates in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, they were held for 15 or 20 years and there was never any charges. Part of it is right there in the language of the Fifth Amendment. It says, if it's someone in the United States, like one of our, citizens, there has to be a grand jury indictment. If it's somebody, in a great danger or in a war, then, there's an exception. It doesn't have to be this grand jury. Just a little tidbit, little Joe Samo legal tidbit there. All right, now we get to this case. And what the heck did Donald Trump do? I'm going to say this right now, just so there's no confusion. He is absolutely 100% guilty of all of this, okay? Now, the beauty in the law is that there's a difference between and I've said this before, right? The substantive law and then the procedure. And then a lot of times somebody could be guilty substantive, in the substantive law, but they could get off on these procedural issues, So I think what's going to end up happening is that he will never spend a day in jail over this, even though he's 100% guilty. And I'm going to go through kind of the, what's going on here and how the case is going to unfold and all that jazz. All right, so here we go. The first order of business in this case is the federal government in their indictment. They list kind of like what he did wrong or how he violated the federal law. And this whole thing about classified documents, it goes like this. The federal government through centuries, they've kind of labeled different documents, different things. Like some documents will be top secret. Top secret is like, absolutely secret, and it has grave danger if it gets out. Then there's secret. Then there's confidential. These are all different labels. Then there's, and I have to say this right, no foreign. No foreign is not releasable to a foreign national. So there's all these different categories. Now, Donald Trump says over and over, I could just think in my mind to declassify, and it's declassified. That is 100% wrong. There's no authority for that. I don't know. Nobody knows what he's talking about. Now, if he goes to works with the federal government and says, this is not a big deal that, Russia has nuclear weapons in this part of the country or something. Let's agree that the whole public should know this. And they kind of agree to that. Okay, fine. Go ahead and store that record and that map in your bathroom, Donald Trump, because it's not a big deal. So if they do, I'm giving you the short version of all that. Because if it's true that all of this, what they say he had at his house, in Mar-a-Lago, and what he took on airplanes and what he had in his little pad in New Jersey and all that, if all that is true, there's no way that is declassified documents. And if they are declassified documents, that means we could publish them on the internet, right? So all of that is just things that he says in his speeches and everything that just make no sense to people that understand. But his, whatever, maybe his supporters agree, maybe for whatever reasons, he gets a lot of political donations after he says things like that. Now, as a lawyer, I'm just focusing only on the legal issues here. When he was leaving the White House, this is January 2021, he's leaving the White House. And as you may recall, like January 6, 2021, and during that month of January 2021, it was very chaotic to say the least, right? And he was saying, the election is rigged and I'm not leaving and I'm still the president and I won the election. And a lot of people agreed with him. And there was the whole Capitol thing on January 6, 2021. And he wasn't ready to leave. And so the reason why I'm saying that is that in all accounts say, kind of toward the end, when it was getting close to Inauguration Day on January 20, 2021, he still had all his paperwork there, dang it. And everything was kind of in boxes. And they kind of, when he left the White House, they just kind of like got everything in boxes and just eventually kind of took off at the last minute. So it was a very chaotic exit, right, to say the least. And then he took it to Mar-a-Lago. Now, Mar-a-Lago, and we did an episode on this where I kind of explained, this was way before the arrest, kind of like what happened and how he got there and everything. So I'll keep it brief here. We have 25 guest rooms in Mar-a-Lago. There's 2 ballrooms. There's a spa, gift shop. There's a pool. There's offices. They've had weddings. They've had other banquets and things like that. And so we've had thousands and thousands of people go through there, and it's a very, very big place to have all these documents and records stored everywhere. And more or less, everyone has access. It's not everyone, but a lot of people have access to different places. And one of the things that people said is, well, what the heck? The Secret Service has been there protecting Trump. And the response to that from the Secret Service is, we are only there to protect Donald Trump. We're not there to look at paperwork and everything. We're only there to protect him. So they didn't keep tabs on the paperwork and things like that, okay? And so then ultimately, when, the federal government kept talking about this, so then they sent requests to Donald Trump saying, we want all of this paperwork back. We've tracked that you've left with all of these things. And some of it was these, I call it the stupid, memorabilia. Okay, so that one is not anything that is a part of the indictment. The memorabilia things, like there's this like archive, this, that, none of that is in this criminal case. The only thing in the criminal case is the actual classified documents. So there was discussion about this, and there was discussion about these classified documents. And this is where it gets very, very dicey in terms of what Donald Trump did. All right, so he said, I'll look for it, and I'm going to give you the exact kind of things that were going on here. Instead of me explaining it, let me kind of like quote the federal government here. All right. So what we have here is that in the FBI, when they open an investigation to try to get all of this, and then when Donald Trump said, okay, I'll turn this over, what he then did is, according to the federal government, Trump endeavored to obstruct the FBI and grand jury investigations and conceal his continued retention of classified documents. And the way what they're saying is that he kept these documents even as they kept trying to get it, suggesting that his attorney falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that Trump did not have the documents called for. There was an attorney who's unnamed that, what can you say, ratted out Donald Trump? Is that the right terminology? The attorney said, well, Donald Trump told me to get rid of this paperwork or to tell the federal government that we don't have these particular documents. Now, a lot of people have asked me, well, wait a minute, isn't that attorney-client privilege? And I say, yes, it is. I think remember what I said earlier about the procedural issues. This is going to be something that will be debated and fought over for at least several years. And what I mean by that goes like this. So Donald Trump, these lawyers came to the federal government saying, wait a minute, Donald Trump told us to hide certain documents. Donald Trump told us to get rid of certain documents, instead of turning them over. And he told one of the lawyers, well, what the heck, Hillary Clinton deleted things. Why can't I just delete these documents, and things like that he told to his own lawyers. And that one is going to be a procedural issue that's going to last several years, because clearly the law is anything a client says to his attorney is always privileged and confidential. When I used to teach law, I always used to tell the students, anytime a lawyer says, this is the rule, it's always this, then the lawyer will say, except. That always happens. A lawyer says, this is the absolute rule, except. And the exception is if the client says to a lawyer some sort of like a criminal activity, all right, then there's like this exception to the attorney-client privilege. That one is a very gray area because you want clients, like let's say they tell their lawyer, okay, yes, I did kill the person. Believe it or not, they don't want the lawyer to say that to the government because then the lawyer could say, well, here's our options, or why don't you just plead guilty, or why don't you keep your mouth shut because you have the right to remain silent, and that it's the government's responsibility to prove all that. So, clients should have that kind of confidence that they could say certain things to the lawyer. Now, don't get me wrong. If the client says, hey, tomorrow, can you go kill this guy for me? We got a problem. That should be revealed. Okay. But here, the statements that the attorney said, it's very questionable, because he would say things like, why can't I keep this? Why can't we delete this? Why can't we just destroy it? Why can't we just say this? Those kind of questions, it's not necessarily that he's, Donald Trump is a smart guy, and even with the next possible indictment, it was this phone call in Georgia when he said, oh, I'm sure there are, 1,400 votes or 14,000 votes, whatever that number is. Anytime there's kind of a gray area in criminal law, it's supposed to go in favor of the defendant. Now, what I anticipate about this is because a lot of the evidence that they have against Donald Trump is his own lawyers that ratted him out, because they're the ones that said, yeah, he told us to move these boxes, he told us to sign this, he told us not to show the government these boxes or whatever. So that's a lot of the evidence, because they have to prove that he intentionally hid all of this from the government, right? And I think that what's going to happen is, before there's a trial in like 7 years from now, if there ever is one, right? Before there's a trial, they have to the government has to present this evidence to the court. Then the court has to rule on whether or not that evidence can be admissible to a jury. And then what's going to happen in the procedure of all of this is going to go like this. The court in Miami, that's the federal district court in Miami, they will make, the judge will make some sort of decision. Let's say that decision is this evidence is not admissible. Then the government would appeal that decision to the Circuit Court of Appeal. And then the Circuit Court of Appeal, after a year, they will make a decision. And then whatever decision they make, the United States Supreme Court would love to have a say in it, I think. And then the United States Supreme Court may then come down with a ruling that will take a couple more years. I've always said, if we know something's going to be appealed, I wish there was a mechanism to say, look, this is Donald Trump. We know everything's going to be appealed, regardless of who wins. Like, if the government wins in the district and the district says, no, this evidence is indeed admissible, whatever he said to his attorneys, because of this, it doesn't fit within, or it does fit within the criminal exception, so therefore it's admissible evidence, then Donald Trump is going to appeal. And the Circuit Court of Appeal is going to hear that case, right? And then whoever is going to lose is going to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. So we should just have a mechanism where, hey, United States Supreme Court, do you want to just decide this off the bat, please? Because otherwise, we're going to spend a few extra years. Lawyers would never love that type of efficiency, okay? Because for obvious reasons, lawyers, I don't think we would want that type of efficiency. But no, truth be told, the reasoning behind it is, no, we want the courts to adjudicate the cases on the level that it's at, and only certain cases could be appealed, and then, so that we have like an oversight. And sometimes, these judges will look at factual things, but the appellate judges will look at different things, So there are reasons for it, so I'm kind of joking when I say it's all done just so it's inefficient. All right, good. The documents that the federal government is saying that Donald Trump had, these are documents from the CIA, from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, from the Department of Defense. These are, according to the federal government, these are, documents that relate to the United States nuclear weapons. These are documents relating to maps of foreign countries, sensitive maps in terms of, military things, and a different, like the nuclear capabilities of other countries and things like that. Now, another thing that I don't understand is that what's the year? 2023? Okay, when did he become president? 2017? After the 2016 election? Okay, about 15 years ago, I remember there was this technology where people would send me a text message and then it would erase after I saw it, or whatever, on different apps and different websites. Why? I don't understand, for the life of me, why does the federal government have to print these documents out and physically give it to people? I just don't get it. I mean, I know lawyers, I like to have everything printed because I'm just old and I just love to have paper, and I love to look at paper, okay? And I love to read things that way. So maybe that's the reason, because in theory, all of this can be avoided if the federal government just came up with a very good computer system, right, that showed all of the records on a computer, and then as soon as homeboy is not president anymore, they just disconnect the access to it, right? All of this could be avoided. Do you see what I'm saying? And so why can't they just do that? I cannot understand that. So that they have to, and then what's worse to me is that, okay, so they print all of these things out, and then they don't know where all of it is. Like they have to figure it out and research it and kind of take years later to say, oh, it's at Mar-a-Lago. Like if worse comes to worse and they have to print something out, just have a little freaking AirTag to it, My stupid wallet, I bought this thing where I know exactly where the wallet is at all times because there's this little chip, this little AirTag. You're telling me the federal government has nuclear effing codes and documents and they don't have an AirTag to it? Just be like, hey, let's just see where these documents end up because they're the effing nuclear codes. Ooh. Oh, look at this, dude. Evidence. They're spying on me. Right when I started talking about, my phone started acting up. Did you notice that? Oh, I turned off my phone, damn it. Okay. So regardless, they have all these documents and he has them. So I'm explaining all that to kind of go over the the kind of what he has. And then the federal government in this, they do stay. So he took all these documents with him after he left the White House, right? The beautiful thing is, when he was a candidate, when he was a candidate and even as president, and they noted this in the indictment, Donald Trump himself said, in my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. Donald Trump said, we also need to fight this battle by collecting intelligence and then protecting our classified secrets. We can't have anyone in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential. This is him saying it. One of the first things we must do is enforce all classification rules. Why was he saying all of this? Because he was going after Hillary Clinton. He was saying like she was, nonchalant about this, that she kind of let things go and blah, blah, blah. And then when he became president, he worked very hard to increase the kind of punishment for misusing and kind of misstoring classified information. Then the reason why I said he is guilty, and unless he gets out on some procedural issue, which I think he will, all right, they have the most amazing evidence. And I'm going to tell you why. Because his own workers took pictures of where all of this was stored, all right? His own workers did that. And then so I'm going to show you some of these pictures. So this picture here, he had all of these documents, a lot of them stored in a ballroom. He had a lot of these documents stored in a bathroom. He had a lot of these documents stored in a hallway. And there are text messages going back and forth. If I may read it to you, the text messages that going back and forth saying, hey, what do you want to do with these documents? Oh, I got an idea. Let's move them around. All right, let me get to that. What do you want to do with this? Let's move them here. Let's move them there. Let me read some of those to you, just so I do not misquote this. Okay. He had an interview with a writer and his staff, and it was a recorded interview because he wanted to, publish it, and he wanted to have the writer write a book for him, like as a ghostwriter type of thing. About his time in office and everything. So even Donald Trump, this is all recorded. This isn't like, Donald Trump said, well, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said he wanted me to attack this particular country that they redacted. Isn't that amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look, this is what it is. The writer says, wow. Donald Trump says, yeah, we looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was all him, blah, blah, blah. And then Donald Trump said, wait a minute, let's see here. And he's pulling up this paperwork and these maps. And then this is Donald Trump on a recording saying, I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, and and then the staffer and the writer are all there. And the staffer goes, oh, well, and then Donald Trump says, except it is like highly confidential. This is Trump saying this after he's president. So he no longer has these type of clearances. And this is all recorded, and he knows it's being recorded because he's the one that's doing it, him and his staff, right? And the staffer laughs, yeah. And then Donald Trump says, it's a secret. It's secret information. Look at this. You attack, and then he's like talking about this. And by the way, isn't that incredible? Donald Trump saying it. Staffer says, yes. Donald Trump says, I was just thinking because when we're talking about it, he said he wanted to attack this country. And this is all from a classified document that he's talking about his military, his Department of Defense, and Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about what country they want to attack, right? This isn't a joke. This isn't a movie. This is real. And then Donald Trump says, this was done by the military and given to me. And he's like showing the paperwork. I think we can probably write, he's talking about what to write in his book and everything. And then the staffer says, I don't know. Well, we'll have to see. And then Trump says, declassify it. Staffer says, what? Donald Trump says, see, as president, I could have declassified it. The staffer says, yeah. He goes, now I can't, but this is still a secret. The staffer says, no, we may have a problem. Trump says, well, isn't that interesting? So what I'm trying to say is, some of his defenses are, well, I declassified it. But then they have a recording of him that he authorized a recording because he's talking to a writer and his staffer, and he wants this recorded so that he could publish his book later. And he's saying to them, I did not declassify it while I was president, okay? And now I can't because I'm no longer president. And look at this. This is confidential. Like, he's saying this in a recording. Like, as I'm talking about this, I feel like people are going to laugh at me because they're like, there's no way that happened, Samo. Yes, it did, because they have the recordings. Believe me, they would not arrest a former president unless they knew they had a good case, right? So all of this was stated. This does remind me of a case I had a long time ago, and I'll tell you really, really quick. This guy had a lot of drugs at his house, and it was just a lot of drugs. This was way before marijuana was like legalized, so it was marijuana, and it was laced marijuana. It was really bad. And he lived in that house with 3 other adults, and they were family members of his. And what happened was they arrested him because he was dealing this stuff, right? And then in the jail, they were interrogating him. And he said, they said something like, hey, we could get you out of here tonight. They arrested him on Friday night. We could get you out of here tonight. We just want to go over what happened, And he was telling them. And then they said to him, we arrested your wife because she lived there with him. And these 2 cousins of yours that live in the house with you, they're arrested. But they're saying that this wasn't their drugs. This wasn't, these boxes of drugs aren't theirs, that they're saying they're yours. We want to get them out of here because they're here also, but we can't, and unless, like if you say that it wasn't theirs, then they can get out. He said, and I quote, yes, it was mine. Why the fudge did he say that in a recorded line or in a interrogation? And by the way, the police are allowed to lie. None of that was happening. They didn't have his wife and cousins there. All of that was a lie. There's nothing in the Constitution that says police have to be truthful. Okay, when they're trying to get you to talk. Okay, so they do have to read the Miranda rights, but they don't have to be truthful. So what I'm saying here is, anytime you have evidence from the person, that is always the best evidence, right? So in that case, they had to prove that it was his drugs and not, the other adults in the house. So the best way is his own effing evidence. And that is hearsay, and hearsay is never admissible, except, remember when I said that? Except if there's certain exceptions, and one of them is if it's what's called a party admission. So here, all of the stuff that Donald Trump is saying in the recorded, when he's talking to the writer and his staff member, all of that is out of court statements. So it's all hearsay. So it's not admissible, except that it's called a party admission. He's, the defendant, so that it is indeed admissible. How do you get around that? You can't. All right. You just can't, damn it. You just can't do it. That is how, so anyway, all right. So as if that's not enough, we have a lot more. Okay. So here we go. I don't even know how I could, this is like, to me, I'm getting a little like, it's just crazy how all of this is coming down. Like, to me, I never thought this would happen. And we have like a former president that's being charged with this. And how the heck could a former president be so dumb? Okay, so let's go over now that I told you we have these text messages. So we have here Donald Trump, and then he has this guy, Waltine Nada. I want to explain, because this guy is a big part of this case. Waltine Nada he became Donald Trump's, they call it the body man or the right-hand man or whatever you want to call it. This is going to be extremely important. This guy's going to be a big part of this federal case. And unlike Trump, he might actually go to jail because he's not the former president and he's not running for office and he's not as rich as Donald Trump and he's not as well protected, So he's not going to have as many procedural, safeguards. The only way he'll get out of prison is if he completely becomes a turncoat and turns on Donald Trump and just says everything that happened and all of that. That's the only way. But this guy is a former, he was born in Guam in 1982. You know what? So he's Guamanian. That's the word for someone from Guam. Not a Guaman, but a Guamanian. So he's Guamanian. He was born in Guam in 1982. He joined the Navy in 2001, and he was a specialist in the Navy. You know what he was a specialist in? Nope. Try again. Nope. He was a specialist in cooking food. He was a cook for the Navy. And then he became Donald Trump's right-hand man. All right. By the way, I love Guam and the kind of relationship with Guam in the United States, because it's not a state, right? Guam's not a state. Just very quick, Guam is, an island very far south of Japan, and it was inhabited, from forever ago by, native tribes. And who discovered Guam? I love the word discovered because it was there forever. But when a European gets there, it's called discovered, right? In the 1500s, Ferdinand Magellan, he's Portuguese sailor, but he was working for the King of Spain. So he discovers Guam and, maps it out and everything in the 1500s. Ultimately, in the later that century, Spain took over Guam and it became a kingdom of Spain. And they colonized Guam. And it was in 1898, the Spanish-American War, then America took over Guam. And they didn't take it over and make it a state or make it anything. All they did is they kicked the Spanish out of there. And then it became a naval spot, all right? So that, it was a good spot to get to the Philippines and to get everywhere else. So that's what happened in 1898 after the American-Spanish War. And then the turning point in Guam's history, the next turning point was World War II. I told you guys, right? I want to do a podcast on the World War II history. What do you think of that?
No, God!
I'm glad you agree that would be a fun podcast. So in World War II, December 8, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they also attacked Guam and took over Guam. Now get this, I read a book from a Japanese pilot. He was a kamikaze pilot that lived, one of the few that survived World War II. So he never had the mission that went down. Anyway, when he would talk about the attack on Pearl Harbor, he always called it December 8, 1941. And I said, how the fudge does this guy have it wrong? Because it's December 7, 1941 is the day that live in infamy. But Japan is in a different time zone. They're way ahead of the United States. So I just thought that was interesting. And anytime when I was reading the Japanese recollection and kind of history or World War II, the military memoirs or autobiographies, they always called it December 8, so I always thought they had it wrong. But no, they have it right. We have it right. It's just different days. Anyway, so they took over Guam, and for 3 years, the Japanese occupied Guam. Imprisoned the people there and forced labor and all that. And then the United States, only because Guam was such a good strategic island, they attacked Guam in 1944 and then took it back over from the Japanese in 1944 to reward Guam later. What they did, the United States, is they kind of made it a territory. Well, they did make it a territory. And then to this day, people in Guam, they're protected by the United States as a territory. And this is why it's important in this case. Our guy is from Guam. People from Guam cannot vote for presidential elections. So he's not allowed to vote for Donald Trump, or never did, because he's from Guam. But isn't this crazy? They're allowed to join the military, and they're encouraged to join the military. So people from Guam could become military, but they can't vote in elections, unless they become a citizen, down the line, a voting citizen. And then when they vote in Guamanian elections, there is a Congress member from Guam that is in Congress, but that Congress member doesn't have voting rights in Congress. Oh my God, I love it. I love that whole history. Anyway, so this guy, our guy, the guy that's doing all this with Donald Trump, and he's also indicted and charged, Waltine Nada. He is, he's from Guam. He joined the Navy in 2001 as a cook. And then when Donald Trump was in the White House, he was like in the Navy, they have like a valet for Donald Trump, like get the clothes, get the food, get this, get that, blah, blah, blah. And Donald Trump just took a liking to him, I guess. And then after the presidency, he worked at Mar-a-Lago. Sadly for him, because then he got caught up in all of this. All of that being said, this is the text messages from this guy. He is relaying in text messages to other workers at Mar-a-Lago, hey, we have these boxes, move them here, move them there. And all of this was eventually, the FBI got all of this. And in text messages, they're saying things like, oh, he's tracking the boxes, more to follow today. What does Trump want to do with these boxes? Can we move them from the storage room to the lake room? That was the bathroom. Okay, basically they call it the lake room for some reason. Can we move it from the bathroom to this other room? Oh, what does he want with these documents? Oh, bring them up from here to here. These are just regular people, and they're carrying all of these classified documents throughout Mar-a-Lago. Isn't that crazy? Top secret things. And then they're moving it around in airplanes, damn it. Like, he would move this to his place in New Jersey, so he would fly it on his plane. Like, as Governor Christie said, like, it's not his kids, but he treats these documents like his kids. Like, he makes sure they get them on the airplane. And in some of the text messages, they're debating, oh, we don't have room in the airplane because he has so much luggage, so we can't take the various documents. All of that is in text messages. There's a few more. There's Donald Trump's family member. They redacted the name, but it's either his daughter or his wife. She said, good afternoon, Walt. Happy Memorial Day. I saw you put boxes in Donald Trump's room. Just FYI, I will tell him as well. Not sure if he wants to take them on the plane this time because there's no room. And this former Navy cook said, good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you. I think he wanted to pick them up. I don't imagine he not wanting to take the boxes or take the boxes. He told me to put them in his room and then he was going to take them here. So, all right. As I told you, all of this is very, very good evidence. I can't keep going over it because there's just too much. Donald Trump then said, now there's 37 counts against Donald Trump. The 38th count is only against the Navy guy. I mean, some counts are against both of them. I think Donald Trump has a point about this. He said in one of his speeches, it's 37 counts, all of the same thing. He is kind of right. Okay, counts 1 through 31, get this. The federal government does do this. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Count 1, they charged him with a statute that says you cannot willfully retain national defense information. And by the way, really quick, the difference between Donald Trump and the Hillary Clinton stuff, or Joe Biden, or Mike Pence, Ronald Reagan, whatever, all these other cases, if there's something like some paperwork that they took or some extra things, anytime there was an issue about it, like Mike Pence and Joe Biden said, yeah, go to the House, look at everything you want, take whatever the hell you want out of there, which is what Donald Trump should have just done, and all of us could have been avoided, And then one of the things he says about Joe Biden, Joe Biden has 1,800 boxes that he kept, which is true. When he was senator, he kept his paperwork, which was allowed, and because the senators, they weren't getting these classified documents, right? And if they were, that wasn't what he kept. Things like, letters to different senators or letters to his constituents or, whatever gifts that his constituents would give him, or whatever the fudge, right? So he donated all that to the University of Delaware. So when when all this was going on, he said, well, look at Joe Biden's boxes. The FBI said, that's a good point. Let's look at them. And the University of Delaware said, come on by. And the FBI came on by and they looked at everything and nothing was classified. And Joe Biden said, take whatever the hell you want. If you want all of them back, take them. Like, we don't care, Anyway, so these counts against Donald Trump is willful retention of national defense information, meaning that he retained it after they wanted it back, right? And this is my pet peeve. Count 1. one particular document dated May 3, 2018 concerning White House intelligence briefing related to various foreign countries. Count 2, it's a different document dated May 9, 2018 concerning White House intelligence briefing related to foreign, okay. Document 3, count 3, undated document concerning military capabilities of a foreign country. Count 4, document dated May 6, 2019 concerning White House intelligence briefing about foreign countries. Count 5, document dated June 2020 concerning nuclear capabilities of a foreign country. That's a big one. You know, like in Dumb and Dumber, where one of the IOUs was like 300,000. That's an important one. Keep that one. Count 6, document dated June 4, 2020 concerning White House intelligence briefing. Okay, my point is this. There was 31 different documents that they thought was very important. There was actually hundreds, but they only picked 31. And instead of just saying count 1, retention of classified documents, 31 different documents. What they did is they said count 1, here's a document. Count 2, here's another document. Count 3, here's another document. That's kind of what we like to call in law stacking, okay? Meaning like if you charge someone with DUI, it would be like DUI, driving west on Highway 8. DUI count 2, driving north on Highway 15. DUI count 3, driving east on Rancho Bernardo Road, you know? And then count 4, driving back, driving, you know? So it's what we call stacking. So Donald Trump made it a point to say these are all the same things. I more or less agree with Donald Trump there. You know, it could have, I think there was some show and tell by having 31 counts being the same effing thing. You know, it's like saying Joe Samo, instead of saying he stole a notepad, you know, oh, he stole page 1 of the notepad. Count 2. Joe Samo stole page 2 of the notepad. Count 3. Joe Samo stole page 3. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I'm going to bore the hell out of everyone. If you're still there, I hope. Okay. Then count 32. This one is different. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. This count is simply a statute that says don't effing lie to the FBI after they're investigating something. So this is the one about that attorney-client privilege. After the FBI is asking Donald Trump to produce documents, his lawyers are sending him things saying we don't have this, we don't have that, and all of it was a lie, and his lawyers ratted him out about it after. Okay, count 33, withholding a document. Same thing as the other 31 counts. It's just a different statute because sometimes the law will say, you know, you can't willfully hide a document. Then they'll say something like you can't, you know, forge a document or you can't lie that you still have a document. So there's like different statutes. So they keep, but it's all the same, you know, more or less the same like activity. Count 34, corruptly concealing a document. Same thing as the other things, but this one, it's a higher degree. Like the other one was keeping the document. This one, corruptly concealing, is that, you know, the evidence of them actually hiding the documents when they came to look for it. This count 35, concealing a document in a federal investigation. This one's different. Like it's one thing to hide a document, then it's another thing to hide it after an investigation already started. Do you see what I'm saying? Count 36, the scheme to conceal. Anyway, count 37, false statements and representations. It's one thing if you're hiding something, and then it's another thing if you're actively writing down and signing things that are a lie. And this is the one where Donald Trump is signing things saying, oh yeah, I look for everything in these boxes or everything that I have. When there's text messages going back and forth, hey, what do you want us to do with these documents? You know, after he signed something saying, this is all I have. He's guilty. But there are rules that if he wins the presidency, all of this has to be put on hold. The things I said about the attorney-client privilege and if it's admissible, that will take 5 years to adjudicate if we are lucky. And then once that's done, there will be other things that will take a long time to adjudicate. And gosh darn it, by the time we're somewhat ready, he'll be like 93 years old. And then he'll say, I'm too old to be tried, you know. I do think that he would die before there's ever a trial on these issues. So I don't think he will ever be found guilty of this. And it's not because he's not guilty, it's because of procedural reasons. All right, good stuff. See you next week.